Winchesters is doing what it has to do, especially we came off of a really good episode, just to hop into what we're watching.
Mhm.
Um, it seems like every episode gets like better and better. And now I do understand why episode 4 is Drake Rogers' favorite episode. It is very John centric, so it makes sense. But we also learn a lot about Carlos and his time in the military. In case you didn't know, he's a Navy vet. Um,
I know. I didn't realize that until they were in the group therapy scene. And first of all, Carlos is hilarious when he put his hand in the air and he was like, I'll go first. I guess I must have missed like a line of dialogue or part of his backstory, but I was like, oh, is he acting right now? Is he making all this up? But I didn't realize that he was, and it made that so much more impactful that it was true. But he does kind of have he's he doesn't wear his feelings about it on his sleeve. Like you can always tell John has some pent up trauma that he has not dealt with. But Carlos is, his defense mechanism is his sense of humor and his bravado.
mhm.
Yeah, I know, I agree. I feel like this episode was such a good one for Carlos, and I know it was an important one for John, and we'll get into that.
Oh,
But
I'll
like,
get into it.
I can't wait for that. Um, but Latta has come to the forefront in the last 2 episodes by providing the backstory or the key to defeating the monster or being right all along, and that was great. Obviously, John and Mary are in the forefront of the story as well. I feel like this was Carlos's time to shine. My goodness, did I? What an incredible episode! And I just I also like that we got to see Carlos and John bond an awful lot as well.
Mhm.
Just I don't know how to put it into words. I was really taken by their bond and by Carlos in this episode. Just incredible, incredible.
It was like peeling back of the layers
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, I think John, like the rest of the audience, if we're being honest, was like surprised when Lotta and Mary realized he didn't know that Carlos had served because it didn't seem like that would be your crowd. But like, what is that? What does that crowd look like? I mean, I know that John gives very much soldier boy, like he
Mm-hmm.
just does. But it is interesting to see two different sides of the coin of being someone who served, right? You have John who volunteered with his whole heart. Like he's very a man of his country and wanting to fight for it. And then you have Carlos, he was like, look, I got wrapped up in a bad situation and I had a choice. Either I went to jail or I went to the military. I chose the military. Um, and like that's a decision. So it's just interesting to see someone who was only given um, two choices and he made the best decision that he could versus John, who threw himself into a war zone, not quite understanding the ramifications of that, and how the two of them are navigating the world post being in a very intense and traumatic situation. And John's not doing well. Not that Carlos necessarily was either, but Carlos is more willing to receive help than John. John's like, I'm gonna shoulder it on my own. And it's like,
Yeah, he's
you're
not
not
ready.
shouldering it. He's not. And it was sad actually seeing him struggle with all of that anger that has nowhere to go but out violently.
The writing in this episode I thought was so beautiful because it, for a show that's so larger than life, it has all these monsters and supernatural things. To see it be so heartfelt and honest and bare, especially when it comes to John and seeing the disparity between his experience and Carlos's and how they what they do with that trauma, where they put it. Carlos is very much like, this is helping me talking about it. You should join me. And John's like, no, he's just not there yet. I had a theory that maybe, and I guess it could still stand, that Mary will be the one that he opens up to and will help him realize he should talk to somebody, because I don't think Mary needs to be the one that helps him through all that. That's not a healthy foundation to begin a relationship. But just to see the work that Drake put into the story, I thought was so powerful, especially to fast forward a little bit when he's fighting the what is he called? He was a
Mars NATO.
yeah, him.
Mm-hmm.
When he's fighting him in that the dreamscape jungle thing, um, after he defeats him, to put it lightly, he continues to hit him. and the look on Drake's face goes from like, you could see like John was having, he enjoyed that, releasing his anger. He almost had fun doing that. You can see the slight like grin on his face. And as the dream world, I don't know what to call it, as that fades away and it's just him and Carlos standing in that empty room, Drake subtly dropped that grin as like the realization dawned on John that wasn't, I shouldn't have enjoyed that. That was, I pushed, I went over the line a little bit. And it's just such a subtle work that Drake did. And I was blown away by that scene because I wasn't expecting that much, like, I don't know, maybe I wasn't expecting that much depth out of this particular story, but they really went there. And I think this episode will help a lot of people sort through their own emotional journeys.
Yeah, because they had different styles of doing that. And meeting people where they are. What's great about the scene that you mentioned, Reed, is like right after John does all that, there's a lot of vulnerability between him and Carlos, and they're just staring at each other because John knew he took it too far, and Carlos knew he took it too far, to the point where Carlos, who's rarely shaken, was shaken by what happened. But Carlos also gives him the room to be at that spot in his trauma, and just simply says, if you need to talk, I'm here. And I love that moment because there wasn't any judgment. It wasn't a good moment. That was not a great moment for John, but it didn't necessarily change. It changed how Carlos saw him, but not like in a way that made him scared of him, more of scared of what could happen to John if he doesn't open up.
Yeah, more of like, oh, I didn't know you were holding all that in. Like, that's not great.
And I think that's why it worked so well with their bond in particular, because it's been interesting that John's come into this like world of hunters and he's still trying to learn himself. And every episode you can see he has some kind of new doubt, but he's always quite like playful about it. And then he has faith he can overcome it. Whereas Carlos is this like esteemed like veteran hunter who like almost you wouldn't think lets things phase him. So the fact that both Carlos was willing to open up in the therapy sessions and talk about all that he went through, paired with the fact that he was genuinely shaken by what he saw John go through and what he saw John become in that moment. I think it was a heavy moment for John, but again, I think it was just such an important character moment for Carlos as well, because we got to learn so much about the two of them, and that yes, they're inherently different, but they also have some similarities, and they bond over their similarities. But you got to see how they adapted to this situation and how they dealt with their trauma differently. Whereas I like the fact that this was very much an episode of the week, but it did have an awful lot of emotional gravity that will carry forward into the rest of the season. I'm not sure we'll see Carlos's group therapy sessions again, but the fact that they took a moment in the final few minutes of the episode to show that it meant so much to him that he started going back to them and that he stuck around and clearly it was helping him. I thought that was very moving as well, particularly because John's obviously stuck and he doesn't know how to open up about his trauma. And of course, the final scene with him and his mom was just so powerful, so powerful.
I actually kind of liked, because by the end of the episode, I was kind of like, okay, how are they going to land this? Where are they going with this? In my mind, I was like, oh, they could just, John's ready to, go to therapy and talk about it. But I kind of like that he didn't go to that place quickly. It's going to be a longer journey. He's going to cry in the bathtub with his mom, which sometimes you need to do. And like, look, recovery is not a straight line. So, and I like that they're portraying that. Like, he's not going to be like, I'm here. I could see where I need to be, but I can't do that yet. So he has to go other places. And I like that he's not. It just makes the character more interesting and relatable that he's going to find his way slowly but surely.
And there are different ways to cope. Then not all of them are healthy, but there are different ways to cope. And I think that this episode pointed that out very well for Carlos's therapy. For John, he's not there yet for a coping mechanism. I think right now we're just still burying things until they explode. But even Mary and Latta had their way of coping that they discovered through Maggie's room. That sequence about realizing that the way Maggie continued to carry light with her came from the postcards and the two bad things and one good thing that she would write on it, so that she could obviously still be aware of some of the darkness or some of the bad things that she went through, but also to be able to have not a silver lining, but this one bright spot to be able to focus on, and that the girls adopted that themselves at the end of the episode, while giving Mary space to be able to move a little bit further into her grief, I thought was beautiful. This episode does a lot in 45 minutes, and it tells you so much about the different characters and where they are in their headspaces. And John's not in a great place, like in contrast to everybody else. He's just really not in a good place, and the rest of them are getting to better places. And I do wonder how that is going to play out as we move further into the season.
Just on a lighter note, movie theater guy popped back up.
He did. He got a name.
But Mary used him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think do we think she's going to pursue that any further, or is he just like a means to an end? He got his dime back, and she got her info.
Michael, you go first, because I'm still thinking about it.
I'm confused. Usually when they have one of those like teasers at the end, it builds up something that isn't just episodic, unless it's like tied to the monster or the villain, whatever. It can set up the next episode. But this is very much geared as Mary's like storyline moment as she was letting go. He pops up at the right place at the right time. Big John at Mary Shipper here. That's the direction I want the show to go in. That's the direction I know the show will go in. But I, as a creative person, I would be slightly disappointed if all this person turned out to be was a plot device, if that makes sense. I hope he has more purpose than that. Yes, he was a good plot device, because it sounds like he's not just a reporter looking for the next big story. He wants to break the truth, and that's a good thing. But there has to be more to it than that, right? It's very strange. Like we got the Bridget Regan tease in the end of last episode, and that's obviously set up her villain for the season. So was this just to set up this guy to be a plot device for this one episode? Like, surely there's more to it than that.
See, I'm saying, I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be a thing, and then she was just like lying to him to get some info.
I don't know though. So like the way that everything is framed, it seems like he will be important, even if he's not important initially. And I say that because there really was no reason for us to have a spotlight on the card that said Kyle Reed.
Mm-hmm.
That
you're right.
She could have just said Kyle, like when she heard his name or something, and gone to go see him. So like they generally do not do that if you're just there to tie up a loose plot device, a plot point, and then move forward. So I think he's coming back. But because she used him and was fine with using him, I'm like, ooh, I mean, I already knew y'all weren't going to last, but this just feels like it's going to blow up in Mary's face at some point, or he's going to be put into danger and she's going to realize she can't really be with anybody right now. I don't know. But in either case, it did also give us a cute moment with Latta and her, where Latta was like, oh my God.
she was giving best vibes.
Yes, she was. I thought that was rather cute. Actually, I love that the ladies teamed up in this episode. I love seeing Millie along for the ride. One of my favorite things that they've done so far is that all of John's like friends get a little moment with Millie. Like they just pop up and they get an introduction. And Carlos is walking his uniform to like, what was it, a guitar riff, as they both watched him come up. I was like, that's adorable. I love that's his first meeting with Millie, and she likes him. It was great. I think she was rude to Ada, but I think she thought she was messing with Henry, and that was why she was rude. But when she meets the kids, every time she's met one of the kids, I've always enjoyed it.
I love her when they were in the scene with the vase, and Latta was like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And then we just smacked it out of her hands. And she's like, okay, how do we know if it works?
She was great. Bianca's delivery there was amazing. And which is why I'm also happy that she had mentioned in the interview I did with her that this will not be the last time we see Millie with the Scooby gang. She will be clashing with her son over it though. Because I guess he's like, Mom, it's my group. Why are you here? But it's also because she loves him so much and she wants to protect him. And that's basically what she's done. Also, he's reckless and just runs into danger, no plan. So, and so she knows that. Oh, she had a line about that. I forget like what to paraphrase. It was just that if he sees something, like if he sees danger, he's going to run head 1st into it. And that's just who he is as a person. And I love how she just explained that to Mary and Latta. Like that's a problem, especially where he is with his PTSD.
Yeah, it highlighted she knew him better than anyone, which I think maybe was why it was important that she consoled him in the end. But I love seeing her get to team up with everyone every week, because in those shows they tend to keep the parents away from the kids' storylines, and I hope we get to see more of her as part of the gang, because I love her no nonsense approach. She was so good.
More Millie, and we're getting more Millie. That's also her fighting with, I'm assuming, monsters, so that's going to be fun seeing Bianca do stunts. Is there anything else about just one more sequence? The fight sequence was really good between Mary and John. It established a great sort of rapport between the two of them, and I love how Mary could reach clearly you need the actual fights. Let me just throw this thing down and let's get to it.
It's a great moment between the two, and it also set up the episode well, because you knew he had some pent up stuff that he needed to get out. And I don't really know if the episode accomplished that, but I thought looking back now, it was such a clever scene between the two.
A lot, I think, clicked for Mary. She had that experience, and then when Millie was like, he runs straight into danger, she was like, oh, yeah, that tracks. You're right. That could be an issue.
So now we're keeping an eye on John, which is a good thing. They need to keep an eye on John.
Yes.